to Steve's Place. I'm Steve, your host, and tonight's guest will be Russell Anderson. But first, I want to remind people that the 2023 Extraordinary Technology Conference is coming. It may seem like it's a long ways off, but August is just around the corner, at least for me. And there's a lot of stuff to do, but I'd like to encourage you all to get there and sign up for the conference. Uh, this week we're still running the 40% off. If two people sign up, you get an additional 5% off. Actually, save 45% tonight only. So call me after the show. I encourage you all to get ready for it. If you plan early, it works very good. If you plan early, and it's very affordable. It looks like we're going to have $82 a night, rooms again, and that includes the breakfast and everything. And then with the evening stuff that I provide, the living part is practically free. So sign up and sign up and start your planning. Like I say, August is right around the corner. And I also like to remind everyone, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. And if you like what we're doing, I encourage you to hit that thumbs up button, because what that does, it helps us on the search engines. Like when people are looking for Tesla, if we have a bunch of checks, thumbs up, we'll get to the top of the list. And like I say, I encourage you all. And if you're not a member is like $9.99 a month, and that really helps us. And we have we have over 600 plus presentations. Okay. And so I encourage you to get up there and become a member and have access to everything. If you have any problems, you can always reach me at steve@teslatech.info. To get there easiest is just go up to our website, teslatech.info. And I have a Steve's Place at the bottom. You can go directly to here, or you can just go to the Tesla Tech channel and subscribe. It's free, and then you become a member. It's $9.99 to see everything. It's worthwhile seeing some of these older inventors and that. They are no longer here, a lot of them, and some are getting ready to go. And we all have a limited time here, so we need to take advantage of that which we're given. So please get up there, become an exclusive member. You have global access 24/7. It's great because you don't have to keep all these DVDs on your shelf. You don't have to worry about them wearing out and everything. Just to watch them on YouTube. And so become an exclusive member by joining, and we'll be getting with you later. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest, Russell Anderson. First met Russell in 1990 when he came to the Tesla Symposium back then, on even year, and he's been working in the anti-gravity field ever since. This is one of the areas that I think is going to make a tremendous difference in the world tomorrow. So without further ado, go for it, Russell.
Hey, Steve, how you doing? Good to see you again.
Yeah. So just go ahead and just jump right on in there.
Okay, well, one of my specialties I've been studying for a long time. You'll see I've been in this field, studying and researching for just about 40 years, and speaking publicly on it for 33 years almost, and building working devices for 33 years. And a lot of these devices are patented, and most of them work better than what is claimed in the patent. So my specialty being anti-gravity, when we look at UFOs, or UAPs as they're called today, you can see that they share a lot in common with patented devices that people have built and others have patented. And there is no difference, no discernible difference in the methodologies employed to get from planet A to B in reasonable time and economy, whether it's built on Proxima Centauri 3 or Sol 3. We're Sol 3 or Terra 3 if you're Latin, speak Latin. But anyway, yeah, alien drive systems. This first photo that's up is a flying craft, an actual man-made UAP by David Hamel. And David Hamel is a UFO contactee from Canada. And he wrote a really great book that may be available on eBay or elsewhere called, excuse me, The Granite Man and the Butterfly. Granite being like, the not igneous, metamorphic rock. Granite, it's also an igneous rock. And it's a special pink granite that this man uses, that Hamel uses as pinions in his flying devices. And these are energy producing devices. And they fly in the same manner that many UFOs fly. And that is by electrodynamic propulsion as opposed to aerodynamic propulsion. And of course, electrodynamic propulsion operates in the medium of the ether. And that's basically the fabric of space-time. And Thomas Townsend Brown in the 1950s did experiments at Agnew H. Banson Labs in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and basically confirmed what a lot of quantum physics already suspected, quantum mechanics and quantum physics, that the nature of space-time is basically electrical. And everything in space-time is electrical, and also that all forces and all fields in nature are related, reciprocal, and interchangeable. So by manipulating one, you can affect the others. Not only that, but small changes in the ether lead to large physical effects. So you can build these devices with conventional means. My friend Dave and I joked back some 20, 30 years ago that you can find everything you need to build starships, homemade starships at Home Depot. And that's basically the truth. You can you have all the materials you need to build these things, and they're just following commonly held physical principles, but yet effects like the Biefeld-Brown effect break cherished physical laws, like the conservation of energy law for one, and for 2 and 3, Newton's first and third laws of motion. And that's really interesting because these devices are just obeying conventional physics as taught. There's nothing exotic in them, although the effects that they do, antigravity, FTL drive, it's completely related to electrodynamics. And Dr. Gabriel Lippmann, Nobel Prize winner who won Nobel for something completely unrelated, discovered a long time ago that inertia is solely dependent upon net charge of a body. So if a body is replete with excess electrons, in other words, having a negative charge, it will have little to no inertia. And the body that is more positively charged, net positive charge, will have more inertia, be more difficult to move or change direction. So we see that electrodynamic forces, carefully manipulated with properly shaped electrodes, and a good power source is all you need to explore the universe. That's basically it. Anyway, can we go to the next slide, please, Steve? Yeah. With electrodynamic propulsion, or electrogravitics, as it's not commonly known, but of course in our circles it is known, you can go from horse and buggy to starship in one lifetime. And in fact, that was done on this planet, not just other planets, but a long time ago, various other super civilizations, to our own developing tool using mechanized mechanical electrodynamic civilization. And Nikola Tesla gave us our electrical 20th century. So not enough due has been given Nikola Tesla until now. Next slide. Yeah, going back to the fact that all forces and fields in nature are reciprocal and interchangeable. We have a three points, three vertices, and three sides of a pyramid. We have electricity at the top, magnetism on one side, and gravitation on the other. So if we connect those dots, connect those points, those vertexes, we have electromagnetism on one, electrogravitation on the other, and what's on the third side, bottom side, magnetogravitation. And there are magnetogravitic devices as well as electromagnetic devices. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at what gravitation actually is, well, the ether being the fabric of space-time, which is electrical, think of the rubber sheet model on the right-hand side in two dimensions. Of course, a rubber sheet is two dimensions. Think of a flux of what de Broglie calls ultra-mundane particles, pushing everything, accelerating everything to a singular point, a center of gravity, center of mass of any massive body in space. And if you take the wireframe or rubber sheet model and make it in three dimensions, on the left-hand side, around a planet or a star, or something really massive, that's what it's going to look like. Space is distorted, and those lines of force are going down to that source of gravitation. Next slide, please. Now, George S. Pigott in 1904, well over a century ago, did force field antigravitic, electrogravitic experiments with simple 19th century, basically, technology, very steampunk. You have a Wimshurst machine under several atmospheres of pressure and a gas such as CO2, or just ordinary atmosphere under a lot of pressure to raise the current level. And static generators such as a Wimshurst machine or other disk generator, wasn't using a Van de Graaff. And he was generating anywhere from 500,000 to upwards of 1,000,000 volts, and or even as little as 100,000 volts, 200,000 volts, and he was seeing effects where he was levitating metallic balls, silver balls, and non-metallic items with that force field apparatus. Basically, it's a force field projector on the floor that can be swiveled to any direction, and a ground plate on the floor for separation of charge. And he found that after a while, he could remove the ground plate and the object would still be suspended electrogravitically. He also observed a belt of blue dots and a strange dark band around the center of or axis of rotation. So sometimes they would rotate, and you'd have this field effect on these balls. Next slide, please. Now, this is the famous Thomas Townsend Brown electrokinetic apparatus. That's U.S. patent number 2949550, as published or granted by the USPTO in August 16th of 1960. And I replicated this back in, started to build the discs in 1990, and I flew those discs and larger 3-footers, 1 meter diameter discs when they were all done, around that pole with a high-powered, high voltage generator, flyback-based generator, and a Cockwoff-Walton voltage multiplier that I built along with it to power the thing. And it worked better than what was claimed in the patent. They'd fly around, the discs fly around silently at a decent speed with very low input, say 100 to 120,000 volts at some tens of microamps. So that's not a lot of watts, maybe about 40, 50 watts. So these devices, they shatter very cherished physical principles, such as the aforementioned conservation of energy law and Newton's first and third laws of motion, and that more force is created in the disks than is equivalent energy input into the devices. So you can see this is a better way, if you incorporate this into a vehicle, a better way to move about the universe, and a better method of getting to point A and B, whether you're on the surface of a planet or going from planet to planet, or solar system to solar system, or solar system to star system, I should say. Only our system is a solar system. Next slide, please. Yeah, and here are some of the devices. These new photos just came out within the past several years, and basically show what I built. Just a shell of a metallic disc that's charged negatively, and then some plexiglass or perspex insulating standoffs. And what goes on them is a forward electrode. Remember, the disc always wants to move toward the forward electrode via Coulomb's law of electrostatic attraction. So you have this huge area of the disc and behind the disc that's negative, and a positive pole in front. So if we remember our electrodynamics, positive charges are attractive on matter and negative charges are repulsive on matter. So a three-dimensional wave is created in space-time. Remember, the nature of space-time is basically electrical. The ether is basically electrical. So a wave is set up, and this device just rides that wave into infinity as long as the charge is maintained. And it's not a whole lot of charge that's needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, there it is with the forward electrode attached, and examining the disc. That's Thomas Townsend Brown, the inventor, or T.T. Brown, Thomas Townsend Brown. And he was the American electrical father of antigravity and warp drive, since this is warp drive. Antigravity methodologies are warp drive, FTL. The force field cancels out. Remember Gabriel Lippmann's work with electrostatics, determining that the net charge of a body is what determines its inertia. Well, bodies that are charged and energized and moved by this methodology do not have inertia. So by their very nature, they are FTL and warp drive, fulfilling all the requirements for the Alcubierre equation for FTL travel within the framework of relativity. So you can see that this is a warp drive methodology with low power, and the negative energy that Alcubierre talks about is the ether. Remember, the ether is a sea of negative energy, or A.P. Dirac called it a sea of electrons, electrons being negative energy. So these devices swim in a sea of electrons, basically. Next slide, please. You can also use it for anything that moves, from cars to, here's a boat. It's a radio-controlled, remote-controlled electrogravitic boat. And he demonstrated this, I believe, in Madison Square Garden, and also for the U.S. Navy in the 1920s and 30s, actually the 1930s. And when this boat moves through the water, there is no bow wave and no wake, no matter what the speed. And it can go much faster than conventional propellers or screws can propel it through the water. Much faster and no wake. Would the Navy be interested? I would bet you Navy beans that they would be interested. Next slide, please. And here's the aforementioned wave that's created by the separation of charge, opposite polarities. The disk wants to accelerate into that positive charges, but it's prevented. It has an insulator, standoff insulator. So those electrodes, basically the forward electrode, which should be anything from a wire to a tube, like a carbon tube or a stainless steel wire, and the ship just being any sort of good conductor of electricity. And the skin of the ship carries the charge, so the occupants and payload are safe inside. It's a skin effect. And the ship wants to accelerate into those positive charges, but can't. It's riding because of the electrode that's holding the insulator, rather, it's holding those electrodes at a fixed distance. So you have a wave set up, and the ship or saucer or boomerang, flying boomerang, or whatever you're electrifying is just riding that wave of electrically modified space time, which is a dipole. Next slide, please. Now, here's Hamel, David Hamel, and the aforementioned Granite Man of the book, The Granite Man and the Butterfly. And you can see that he is working on one of his flying devices, flying saucer. He is a UFO contactee, and he was shown by his comrades from other worlds exactly how to build this drive system. And it basically uses ordinary ferrite magnets in these cones that are have the magnets in opposition. Next slide, please. And there's a completed device on a porch adjacent to his roof. This device was energized. Notice the hole in the bottom. When the magnets are set in opposition and a top magnet is pushed down with a screw type apparatus, it sets these cones wobbling. At first they wobble a lot, then they seem to stabilize and not move at all. But what's happening is that they're wobbling so fast, the only way you can see the motion is with a strobe light apparatus. Now you see the hole in the bottom. A tornado-like rushing of air goes up through that hole, and the device, because of that, just like a thunderstorm, develops a very, very, very powerful electrostatic charge, but on a smaller scale. And that charge, if not mitigated or bled off, is allowed to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate in the shape of the device, just like the high-pressure vessel of a Van de Graaff generator or a Tesla coil keeps accumulating that charge. That charge doesn't bleed off. And first it will glow a red color, then a yellow, then a orange, then a purple, then a bright white, and then off it goes straight up into the universe, accelerating really fast with no noise, and then blacking out the entire neighborhood. Of course, that's familiar behavior to anybody who has experienced or studied UFOs, that they stop car engines and electrical circuits and make house lights go out and otherwise leave evidence of their passing. Next slide, please. Yeah, there he is up in Canada, David Hamel, working on that flying saucer, another flying saucer model. I believe he passed away. Next slide, please. And there he is working on some more cones for the gravitomagnetic device. Next slide, please. Just making sure everything is lined up perfectly. Next slide, please. Yeah, this device uses special granite pinions as dielectrics, basically. I think there's something about natural electricity. And Thomas Townsend Brown, T.T. Brown, also studied petrovoltaics. It's a natural charge that develops in these rocks, these igneous and metamorphic rocks. Next slide, please. Close-up of some of the magnets that are just bolted on. Ordinary ferrites. Next slide, please. And there's a diagram of the device, a crude diagram. It's not the best copy, but it shows basically the cones that are inside the device and the shells of the device, which are also cones, which help to separate and move this charged and uncharged air, basically just like a thunderstorm. And charge builds up, but unlike a thunderstorm, there's no lightning-like discharge of the accumulated energy. It just keeps building up and building up and building up, which could be dangerous if not bled off and somehow controlled and mitigated. Next slide, please. Now there's another diagram, a little clearer. The upper right-hand corner is one of the granite pinions. The cups are made of a special pink granite, and the pinion is, of course, also pink granite. And That's basically the dielectric in the circuit, but helps to accumulate the electrostatic charge. And again, just like a lightning bolt, the charge is very, very high voltage, hyper voltage, with almost no current. Very, very low current. Again, some tens of microamperes. Just a few microamperes, just totally electrostatic. Now, what we know also from electrodynamics is that an electrical field and a gravitational field should be thought of as synonymous, or completely congruent with each other and one and the same thing, and interchangeable and reciprocal. Next slide, please. There's the gravitomagnetic drive, a little better photo of it, and the craft configuration, the way the cones are set up, the magnets that you see in the rings that are near the center are in opposition so that they float. Next slide, please. It's another diagram. Next slide, please. Now, I thought this was interesting. He laid out a blueprint of the device on the rug, and beautiful rug. You can see what you get at the corners of those. You can see it's clearly a Star of David. So in ancient times, the Star of David, along with the caduceus, which was the physician's symbol, and modern times it became this physician symbol. The Star of David is a symbol for powered flight and energy conversion. In this case, energy conversion of the ether into voltage. Another name for voltage is Vril, and the German Vril craft took advantage of electrogravitics as well. So we have here a clear symbol of ancient technology brought forth by modern man, like the book, not Velikovsky. Steve, who wrote Genesis Revisited?
I wouldn't know.
Well, it's a book, Genesis Revisited, How Modern Science is Catching Up with Ancient Knowledge. And I can't remember the name. Velikovsky wrote Worlds in Collision. But anyway, at the corners of each of those triangles that form the Star of David are the cups and pinions, the granite cups and pinions. So I thought that's interesting. Next slide, please. And two ring magnets, and those are just used in opposition to each other so that the cones float on each other. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it's just pressed aluminum, extruded aluminum, and that can easily be done in a proper machine shop. Any machine shop should do. Has the right equipment, as well as industrial presses. Next slide, please. And there's a not as good photo of the device before it took off for parts unknown. Next slide, please. And there's a JLN Labs, Jean-Louis Naudin. I think he's from Canada, either France or Canada, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a great website that I've been looking at for 23, almost 24 years now. And there's the top of the device. You can see that the red is one polarity, the blue is another polarity, and there's a device to decrease the distance between those two magnets at the top in opposition, and that sets the wobbling motion because it can never find equilibrium. The repulsion effect. Hamel talked about, and he said it reminded him of a butterfly caught in a magnetic field, which is an interesting interesting imagery to think about, a butterfly caught in a magnetic field. So you have the title of the book, The Granite Man and the Butterfly. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's a nice wireframe rendered photo rendering of what the gravitomagnetic drive should look like. And at the top, you see the screw for screwing down the two repulsion magnets on top. And then that decreases the distance between the two opposing magnets, setting up that wobbling motion. And the devices never find equilibrium, but set up the air moving through that hole in the bottom of the device. And that air basically forms two vortices within the device of charged and uncharged air. And that charge is allowed to build up and build up and build up until it gets to just monstrous levels. And then you have more than enough voltage for your Biefeld-Brown electrogravitic drive. And the inertia of the thing is eliminated by the electrical field. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's one of the pinions set up with the cups for holding the pink granite cups and pinions. Next slide. Yeah, just stuff bought at Home Depot turned into a flying device. Those frames for the saucer, for the cups, and on the bottom and bottom right and upper left are test devices for testing the magnets in opposition, for getting that wobbling effect. When the magnets in the same polarity are repelling, they're wobbling about, and they're trying to find equilibrium, but they can never really find it when they get to a certain proximity. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can make a device with those wobbling cones, 2 or 3. Recommend 3 to get the full effect, although you can start to see it with 2. You have magnets on the edges of the cones and magnets at the rings just adjacent to the cones. And those magnets, of course, are in opposition, not attraction. So the like polarities are facing each other. And you see that it's held, the bottom cone is held by a pinion cup. And that's what they look like when the thing is all assembled. The frames and the cones with the adjacent magnets. Ordinary ferrite magnets. Don't need rare earths for this. Next slide. And there's George Adamski. George Adamski was famous for publishing photos he claimed he took of alien ships. And he said the people that were in these bell-shaped alien craft or flying saucers looked exactly like we do, like Earth humans. And they come from Venus, he said. Live underground in Venus, not on the surface of the world, but under the surface. Thought that was kind of interesting. But notice the 3 structures on the bottom of the center structure. One can speculate that those are condensers, spherical condensers for flight and attitude control, and a disk generator of some type to generate the electrostatic force needed to fly these things. And of course, an electrical field and a gravitational field are basically one and the same thing. So electrical field, all you need is just voltage, electrostatic potential. You hardly need any current. It's the voltage that does works the magic. Next slide, please. Now, these are alien craft by taken photographs of by Edward Billy Meyer in Switzerland starting in 1975. And he had been having contacts with these aliens since he was a kid, a small child, around 5 years old in Switzerland. And his whole life became about starting a debate that Earth humans needed to have about extraterrestrial life. And he was ordered to take the photographs, and the ships posed for the photographs for proof that he was having contacts. And of course, the photographs all passed all computer analysis, photometric analysis, and whatever other techniques you can name. Plus, the models were energy radiant. It was found, and it's really hard. It would be really hard and really expensive to make models energy radiant. Photographs, 16 millimeter and 8 millimeter films, videotapes, hard evidence of physical samples of metal and crystalline samples, metallic samples that were analyzed by Marcel Vogel, and Jim Delatoso did a lot of analysis, and this is quite real and needs to be taken very seriously, because the story is not about them, it's about us, who we are, where we came from, where we're going, what we need to do to save ourselves and our world from destruction at our own hand. Next slide, please. And yeah, these photos have mountains in the background, trees in the background, things in the foreground, anything a ufologist would want in terms of UFO photographs. Next slide. Yeah, and that one is a very famous one. I think that one's featured in a poster that says, "I want to believe," featured prominently in the X-Files TV show. You have a camera in the foreground, mountains in the background, and an unknown object that is circular, disc-shaped, and looks like it's under intelligent control in Earth airspace with no visible means of propulsion. It is not using heat energy to stay aloft. In fact, quite the opposite. Next slide, please. And there it is around a weather pine, Wettertan or weather pine, a small beam ship. That one's about 7 meters in diameter, about 21 feet. The crew compartment's very small but spacious, and just enough room for 2 or 3 people. And it's very highly polished surface on this one. And that's what I think they call that a beam ship variation 1. And that can go from Earth to a system in the Pleiades in another dimension in that direction, or from there to here in about 7 hours. Next slide, please. And that's about 500 light years. And there's some diagram, not too clear, of various types of Pleiadian or Pleiaren beam ships. Next slide, please. And yeah, there are the descriptions. Sorry, that's so small, but maybe you can spread your fingers apart on the trackpad or the screen if your screen is so equipped, and see the description and function of the various craft. Some are built for strictly interplanetary use. Some are built for interstellar travel. Some are built for time travel, have dome modifications for time travel. Some are for interdimensional travel. And some are from alien races other than the Pleiadian, Pleiaren people, though specifically the ones on the bottom 3. Very interesting case. Next slide, please. And there's a famous or infamous wedding cake photo from 1981, which was one of the last craft observed. Next slide, please. Yeah, the wedding cake ship. Go back to the wedding cake ship for a minute. Sorry. Yeah, that was, of course, analyzed and photogrammetric and computer analysis found to be genuine. And it looks very much like, almost like a Adamski craft, but notice these spheres. This is a so-called experimental craft given to the Pleiaren to test in Earth's atmosphere and solar system, and for interstellar flight. It can make, instead of 7 hours, it makes a trip from the Pleiades system or Pleiaren system in another dimension to us in 7 minutes instead of 7 hours. And it's funny, they Pleiaren people felt like 7 hours was a long time to stay aboard a spacecraft, long time to stay locked up inside a tin can. And our astronauts spend days in tin cans circling the Earth and going to the moon when we were kids. And this is a completely different approach to space travel, not using internal combustion or heat energy. Next slide, please. not using heat energy or internal combustion for lift and propulsion, but using electrodynamics and just the forces of nature itself in the form of how nature does things, and using toroidal vortices. If you look at the ship, imagine two toroids, two spinning toroids with a vortex in the center going up through the center, one on the top and one below, and they're rotating in opposite directions. Imagine that. Imagine you could see those fields. And actually, my wife and her friends say they can see those fields. They're sensitive. So the top of the ship would be charged positive, and the rest of the ship would be charged negative. And of course, the ship would want to rise or fly in the direction of that positive charge. So, of course, when those forces are balanced with the Earth's gravity, you get a stable hover and levitation, which is what we see in the Biefeld-Brown effect. So they're utilizing similar principles. Another principle they utilize is having 12 or at least 12 lasers going out like wagon wheel spokes. And they either project outward or project inward. And that sets up a space-time distortion for manipulating gravitational fields for propulsion, faster than light or below the speed of light. Next slide, please. Yeah, and you have objects in the foreground, which are the ships, objects in the background, such as the mountain, and you can do photometric analyses and computer analyses. And both photometric and computer analyses say that these are large objects at some distance from the camera. And the smaller one is about 5 meters, and that's a radio-controlled telemeter ship or drone ship being controlled by the larger ship, which is manned. And the bottom ship is not unmanned. If you look on the bottom of the bottom telemeter drone ship, you can see 2 of 3 spheres, which are basically condensers, single-plate capacitors, to control the attitude of the ship. And because they're spheres, they won't bleed off charge, which is useful if you're flying electrodynamic craft. That's why these electrodynamic craft from this planet and other planets have no sharp points or edges, nothing to bleed off the accumulated charge. The only reason these fly and have force is because of accumulated charge. If they lose charge, they lose force. Next slide, please. And there's a diagram of a Adamski type or Plejaren type flying saucer with the field lines of force and a diagram of the polarities of the force. You see in the middle is a transformer coil, like a Tesla coil, and you have a positive polarity Tesla coil, the positive pole at the very top, that top center point, and a sheath of positive charges running down. Then the rest of the ship, that bell shape, is charged negatively. And because of that highly negative charge, it's repulsive on matter, it repels the air. So no air can come near the craft at these very high voltages. So the craft is surrounded by a vacuum envelope. And then you have static charge machines, disk generators inside the device. And you have these 3 spheres, which can be charged oppositely or given a single charge, like in a single plate capacitor, for attitude control and additional propulsion. And then field coils to generate static charge and high voltage to power the craft and run the propulsion system. Next slide, please. Now, this is a graviflyer from Russian Alexei Chekhirkov, and this has been famous for the past 4 or 5 years. And with people replicating it, well, not replicating, not yet. There are no replications that I know of yet around the world. I've been working on this for a while, and I got a kit from him. Only thing about the kit, the electronics are not standing up to the rigors of daily lab work. So I got new electronics from him to see how that batch does. But yeah, that goes up, and it's even more efficient than the Biefeld-Brown effect. You have two spinning plates, one positively charged on top and negative below, similar to what you need in the field configuration of Biefeld-Brown effect craft, and an ultrasonic transducer on top, which is similar to a parallel plate capacitor with dielectric in between the two plates. And that's projecting about a 1 to 2 megahertz signal into the device. The Tesla coil operates on 1 to 2 megahertz that powers the central plate, which is stationary. And that's a Tesla coil going at 2,000 output, 2,480 volts AC at anywhere from 1 to 2 milliamps of frequency. And it's a pretty simple device. And you've got magnets, spinning magnets on the bottom disc, 6 spinning magnets with the north poles facing up. And yeah, people are still working on that. And the tuning is the main thing, just getting everything in resonance. That's the big bugaboo, getting this thing going. But it should work as advertised. And people are taking steps to make sure that happens pretty soon. Next slide, please. And there's a field configuration, the field diagrams, the lines of force. You have those big lines, big dark lines are the gravitational waves coming in from space. Gravitation is a property of space, not of mass. Yeah, that's the thing you got to understand. So what this device does, it opens up a hole in the gravitation. The gravitational waves, just like radar waves, would slide around the device and then go on their merry way, while a bubble of no gravitation is surrounding the device. And the device therefore rises up, just like a bubble underwater, a gas bubble underwater. You have the positive E field going one way on top, negative E field going the other way on the bottom, and magnets on the bottom disc, 6 of them, 6 ring or disc magnets, and a Tesla coil AC field on the central plate. And that purpose of that is to keep the two vortices from interfering with each other. And then you adjust the parameters of everything to get a liftoff. Next slide, please. And there's a prototype, which I actually have in my garage now, that we've been working on for the past couple of years. And the actual prototype is just slightly larger. The actual disc in the center is slightly larger. And the central spinning plates, upper and lower, are about that size. That's right for that. Next slide, please. And there's the man I worked with at his behest since 2007 until his death in 2018, Professor John Roy Robert Searle of England. And above him is a 10-foot diameter device called a levity disc, and we call them inverse gravity vehicles today. And my company, Spintronics, also has the patent for that technology. And it's also a free energy device, or a vacuum energy converter would be more accurate, because the device is not free. It's quite expensive. So Rolls-Royce of anti-gravity methodologies. Weight is not a factor. That device weighs about 4.5 tons. It's very heavy. Most of the weight being the weight of the generator itself, which consists of 3 concentric rings that are magnetic, 3 concentric runners or rollers, which are also magnetic around each ring. The inner ring has to have at least 12 magnets. And this develops also a very, very, very powerful electrostatic charge coming off the rim, negative off the rim, and positive at the hub. So you get this double toroidal vortex again. And because of that high voltage, air is pushed away. Again, the device is also going to be in a vacuum envelope. And you have a tornadic-like rushing of forces, but no noise whatsoever. And again, that is one of the leading characteristics of UAPs, UFOs, and UAPs, and this device. No noise. There's no internal combustion, so there's no noise. And the vacuum around the device also attenuates any noise, but of course the components have no physical contact, so there wouldn't be any noise. No noise, clean, no emissions, no fuel, No, nothing to sully our planet and create uh, global warming, help create global warming. Instead, this will ameliorate global warming and the crisis we now find ourselves in with the weather going nuts. Next slide, please. Yeah, there's a model of a levity disk, what it looks like, basically, and the top section is just the framework, so you can see inside. The generator is that white ring near the rim, and what are at the rim are flight cells or flight control cells, those pie-shaped sections that open and close to control the attitude of the craft. And then you have a cold flame barrier at the rim. So the actual generator is just that thin white ring adjacent to those 64 flight cells. So you have 64 struts, 64 flight cells. And this basically is the same thing as a simple alien drive system. And yeah, it's just a better way to get to from point A to point B. When a civilization reaches a certain point in the universe, it will naturally develop this technology, which we see again and again from people like Thomas Townsend Brown and Professor Searle and Howard Menger and Otis T. Carr. Next slide, please. And speaking of Otis T. Carr, there's Otis T. Carr's OTC X1 flying craft. Otis T. Carr studied at the foot of Nikola Tesla and employed many of his principles. Nikola Tesla predated in his invention of the flying saucer T.T. Brown by about 40, 50 years. T.T. Brown was in the early 1920s. And this is a very simple craft, just consists of a rotor with capacitors and these geometric solid metal objects called neutrons. And then you have a neutron in the center that's filled with liquid mercury. And this whole thing rotates, and the neutrons develop a charge by passing through electromagnets at the periphery. And the capacitor plates develop a charge, and the pulses build up a tremendous electrical charge for flying this thing in electrodynamic fashion. Next slide, please. Anyway, that's about it for my talk today. And many thanks go out, of course, to Professor John Roy Robert Searle. And of course, he's no longer with us. He's May 2nd, 1932 to December 4th, 2018. And so he just died 4 years ago, unfortunately, in this month, early this month, 4 years ago. Thomas Townsend Brown, of course, the American father of anti-gravity and warp drive. George S. Pigott, who, of course, did the early 1900s electrogravitic experiments. Van de Graaff, whose magnificent generators produced the separation of charge necessary for flight in electrogravitic fashion. Wimshurst also built a disk generator that does the same thing. Michael Faraday, and Michael Faraday was a bookbinder's apprentice, but yet he laid the foundations for all of modern electromagnetics. Ben Franklin, of course, Marcel Page, the French father of anti-gravity, he has a patent for basically a device that looks very similar to many crafts seen, including Adamski's craft. Nikola Tesla, Otis T. Carr, Ralph Ring, who I met in Holland 10 years ago. To the Stars Academy. Bigelow Aerospace, they know the truth of what's really going on. And now you do too. Spintronics Inc. and all our shareholders whom we work for. Now, may the force be with you, and have a Merry Christmas. And this is the gift to mankind from the aforementioned flying disc type apparatus. Form follows function. If you want to build a device that utilizes artificial gravitational fields for propulsion, rather than using heat energy and noisy explosions and internal combustion, this is the shape that seems to work the best. We see it from many, many civilizations in space, including our own, that this disc-shaped craft is the gift to mankind from people like Nikola Tesla and Thomas Townsend Brown and John Searle, Professor John Searle, and many others. And the patents, you can see the patents. I back in the 90s, I was looking through some magazine, I don't know if it was Popular Science or what, that said anti-gravity patents. So I sent off like a few dollars, and a couple weeks later in the mail, I got this whole sheaf of patents that were electrogravitic and anti-gravity related, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is technology that has been around for a while. And my good friend and colleague, Larry Davenport, said that back in the 1950s, early 50s, I guess it was, that they used to teach Thomas Townsend Brown's electrogravitics. And do you know, by 1956, it disappeared. It disappeared as if some unseen glove had wiped clean any mention of electrogravitics. Same thing happened to Nikola Tesla's work. And you could go on and on and on. That somehow some decision was decided in some dark cabal that this work and this propulsion methodology should not be in the hands of the scientific community and the general public, and would remain in military domain. And as we've seen, that view, that philosophy, had a negative impact on our environment and our society. And thank goodness things are starting to open up, so to speak. And we can have a Star Trek like civilization of clean energy and abundance, and cheap clean energy, abundance, and peace on earth, and goodwill toward men. And that's my spiel for the night.
Excuse me. If you like what you're seeing, go to the bottom of your screen there, and there should be like a thumbs up. Give him a thumbs up. He deserves it. Anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and we're going to the comment board. Those who'd like to join us, the caller line is on the screen there. And I'd like to say some comments here. Number one, I believe that the military does have anti-gravity technology. I would be shocked if they didn't. I remember, primarily because they gave up the space shuttle, and I have never known the military to give up the high ground ever. And so for them to give up access to space means that they must have another way up there. You know, and I remember when I was an engineering student back in '84, the Air Force recruiters gave me a bunch of posters, to hand out, and on these posters was the Aurora, and I have to hand them out a couple weeks later. They come back and they said, "Well, do you have those posters?" I go, "No, I handed them all out." And so they said, "Oh, that was that was top secret. That was a mistake." So, what can I say? So I believe that they have that and they're out there already. So, and I'd like to also let people know that in the past, I published a magazine called I don't know if I can get it on here. Exotic Research Report, and in this issue here, we cover David Hamel extensively through a researcher called Dan LaRochelle, and those are available through us. Um, so yeah, is there any?
Oh, Steve, if I might interject, I never told you this, but you'll find this interesting. Last year, at last year's conference in 2021, I was in our hotel room with people, our friends, and staying with us, and we saw a UFO out the window, hovering over town between us and Sandia Peak. It looked like a orange pink octopus with orange pink arms and orange pink lights on each of its arms, and it was slowly rotating. And somebody standing in town who could see it and looking straight up would definitely have seen it. And other people in town or people who happen to be looking in that direction definitely would have seen it. And we got it on camera. We got it on video. and it just stood there just until we just got tired of watching it. It was a long duration sighting, and we got it on video. So New Mexico never fails to deliver.
Well, you got to figure there's a lot going on in New Mexico. And one of my back issues, I had the whole history of Roswell there. Um, and most people don't realize, but Roswell was our space center in the 1940s at the time. And Robert Goddard, the father of American rocketry, um, he launched all of his after he moved out of New Hampshire, because he needed some open space. He moved to Roswell, and that's where he was launching all those at. And so you consider all of our nuclear weapons was in the Walker Air Force Base there, near Roswell. And you had a guy by the name of Goddard launching rockets. Uh, is it any wonder that there'd be aliens snooping around down there?
Well, Roswell housed the 509th Composite Bomb Group, and they were the group that flew B-29s that bombed atomic bombs Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Is a plutonium bomb for Hiroshima for Nagasaki and a gun type non-implosion weapon for Hiroshima. But both weapons killed millions, hundreds of thousands of people. And at that time, in 1945, with the composite 509th bomb group based in Roswell, New Mexico, those were the most powerful weapons on the planet at that time. And there were a lot of sightings of UFOs, flying discs, and green fireballs. In fact, from 1947 to 1952, of course, November 1952 is the first hydrogen bomb in the Pacific Atoll Proving Grounds. From 1947 to 1952, New Mexico had more sightings of UFOs and green fireballs and that sort of thing than any place else in the world, despite the fact that the UFO phenomenon is a worldwide phenomenon.
Well, I believe the UFOs are here, and they could be a multitude of things, and there's probably more than one type, and the whole Bible's filled with it. But
Oh, Zechariah Sitchin, who wrote, that was the guy who wrote Genesis Revisited, How Modern Science is Catching Up with Ancient Knowledge, and alluded to that book before. I highly recommend people get that book from Barnes & Noble's, Genesis Revisited by Zechariah Sitchin, How Modern Science is Catching Up with Ancient Knowledge. Because this technique of basically of flying saucers are known as in the Indian texts, ancient Indian texts, as Vimanas, and around that same time in ancient Atlantis as Vilixi. Vilixi were cigar shaped. Think of the Tic Tac. And Vimanas were saucer shaped. Think of the Adamski craft and the Billy Meyer craft and Otis T. Carr and Searle. And of course, the craft that I built that flew around the Maypole. And left no doubt in my mind that this technique is it's revolutionary, and that's putting it mildly. This can take us to the stars, take us to Mars in reasonable time and economy, Mars in a month or less, and that's what NASA's saying, and Proxima Centauri. And they discovered a planet that's Earth-like around Proxima Centauri B, in about 2 to 3 months. So think of 2 to 3 months for interstellar travel to our nearest star, and probably go faster than that in a Searle-powered ship. This technology is not beyond human ken, and it's well within our reach. Many prototypes have been built and tested, and work far better and faster than any internal combustion heat energy producing noisy rocket. This is for all mankind, not just the military industrial complex.
so anyway, so does anyone else have any questions or anything out there? Or I'd like to remind everyone again to come to our conference, which will be in August. Russell will be there, and he'll have a lot of hardware there that you can come, touch, and play with. That's one thing about our conferences. We have a lot a lot of hardware out there, that people wouldn't even believe existed. Uh,
I'll be bringing more hardware too, and my famous beam ship award-winning anti-gravity kits that are always I always sell out, and some larger electrolytic models, such as the aforementioned electrokinetic apparatus by Thomas Townsend Brown. I'm going to try to have that this year too, because that's really freaking cool, and some other stuff that will really open up people's eyes and open up their minds, and see that this technology is accessible and available if they want it.
and again, I like to remind people, that if you like what we do here, if you can help us out by just clicking on the old thumbs up button there, you know, and that helps us out a lot. And with the search engines out there and everything. Right now, we're just shy of 5,000 people. I'd like to get over 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you know people, let them know about us and tell them to come up here and subscribe. On our YouTube channel. Subscription is free. It's the members only thing that you have to pay anything for. And the other thing is also, Marcus is not spam in your email boxes because I do send out notices. And if you don't click on your inboxes there and on something, you get marked as unmarketable. And then um, these emailers have this audacity to just not even send them out. It's crazy out there. It's a come. We publish a written program every year and mail it because without that, um, I'm not sure I'm getting to everyone. So if you move, let me know. Uh, if you change your email, let us know. Um, and what we have to do now is every so often I have to um, have one of our helpers here, our volunteers, call people up and check on the emails that bounce on us. Because they're really cracking down on us pretty hard. This whole world, it doesn't seem to be living let live anymore. So please, click on that thumbs up, subscribe. If you really want to help us out, become a member. It's $9.99 a month. We have over 600 um, DVDs up there, probably close to 1,000. I know Russell has quite a few up there. Just go to our website and click on the speaker, and you can look them up and list all of his playlists. And you have quite a few there, Russell. And
Yeah, it should have about like 8 or 9 there, or something like that.
and we're going to be putting some more DVDs up there shortly. Just got to get another disk drive and everything. So with that, I'm just going to call it a night then, huh?
Yeah, unless there's anybody else out there have any questions or comments or anything like that. Uh, yeah, well, it's a sleepy winter's night. So if they're anything like me, they're ready to zonk off and hit the hay.
And next week will be Christmas. So I might be up here. I don't know if I do. It'll just be free form um, on Christmas Eve, or actually, that'd be Christmas Day, and then also New Year's Day. Our next regular show will be probably January 8th. I don't know who I'm going to have up here yet, but I encourage you all to uh, seriously consider coming to our conference. I think you have a great time and become members. That really helps us out a lot. Um, that's what carries us through the hard times and help us move forward. And thank you so much. And y'all have a good day. And
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Steve.
and here's my guy here, my thumbs up guy. I'll see you guys later. Okay, goodbye.